Toby and I are going to show you how to train a clicker retrieve. A clicker retrieve is a way of teaching your dog to fetch objects on cue using positive reinforcement, that is, tiny food rewards to shape your dog's behavior. Retrieving is a very complex skill. In order to teach a complex skill like retrieving, we use a technique called shaping. Shaping means that we take that complicated behavior and we try to break it down into very, very small components and train each component one step at a time. After the dog is successful at one stage, then we can move on to the next stage. We're going to begin by charging our clicker. A clicker is what's known as a reward marker, and a reward marker is a signal to your dog that your dog has done the correct behavior. The clicker is this little plastic box in my hand, and we charge it by associating it with tiny food treats. You can see that Toby really enjoys hearing the sound of the clicker because it predicts that he's going to get a special reward. Now that the clicker has been charged, we can begin to use that signal to shape Toby's retrieving behavior. In order to do that, we're going to start with a very, very simple activity, and that is merely looking at the dummy. So I'm going to hold this dummy in front of him. When he looks at it, I'm going to click my clicker, and then I'm going to reach over and give him a treat. You saw that Toby jumped for the dummy. At this point, I'm not requiring him to do that, but it was a really good behavior. You see that he is looking consistently at the dummy. After 5 repetitions, we're going to check to see what percentage he got right. In this case, Toby got all 5. That's 100% success, and that means we can move on in a very tiny increment to continue shaping the behavior. So the next step that we're going to try is to have him actually bump into the dummy. Great. Good job, Toby. That was so successful that we're going to move on to the next stage, and that is to have him touch the dummy with his teeth. You can see that it takes a lot of treats. Now, Toby did something very interesting. He actually went on an additional step and took the dummy all the way in his mouth. So, taking advantage of that, I'm going to go a little bit farther, and I'm going to get him to hold the dummy. I'm starting with a very short period of time, just a couple of seconds. And notice that when I click the clicker, he opens his mouth in anticipation of the treat so that he does release the dummy. Now I'm going to get him to hold it for a little bit longer, as soon as he finishes coughing up his treat. Okay? Now your goal is to be able to get your dog to hold the dummy for about 10 seconds. When your dog has done that, you can begin to put the behavior on cue. The way that you do that is to give your dog a cue before it begins the behavior. In this case, I'm going to use the cue fetch. Sit. Fetch. We're not going to bother to do 5 repetitions at each stage now because I think you have the idea. Training in groups of 5 repetitions can be very useful. It can give you an instant sense of how well your dog is doing. If your dog is getting 4 or 5 out of 5, that is 80 to 100% consistently, then you can go ahead to the next stage. If your dog is only getting 3 out of 5, you need to keep working at that level for a while. If your dog is getting 2 or fewer, you need to simplify, make things easier for your dog. After your dog is consistently fetching and holding, you can begin slowly to lower the dummy to the floor. Fetch. 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 If your dog is successful when you hold the dummy very close to the floor, then you can actually put the dummy on the floor. Sit, stay, fetch! Once your dog is consistently picking the dummy up from the floor on cue, then you can begin to toss the dummy. Stay. Fetch! Having completed that, your next task will be to add distance, and we'll show you how to do that in a separate video. But before you finish up with your trained retrieve, it's important to generalize that behavior by having your dog fetch several different kinds of objects. This, for example, is a larger dummy, so it will require your dog to open his mouth more, and it weighs a little bit more. Stay. Good boy. This is called a deadfowl trainer. This, as you can see, he gets very excited by this because it simulates the weight and feel of a bird, and this particular one is also scented with pheasant scent. Stay. Stay. Back. Good boy. Good doggy. You can also use your dog's favorite toys. Fetch. Sit. Whatever you choose, be sure to generalize your clicker retrieve so that your dog learns to retrieve a variety of objects. In our next video, we'll show you how to add distance, and we'll also show you how to proof your clicker retrieve for distractions.